Hello and welcome to the Gateway Podcast. I'm your host, Gary the Servo Skull, and with me I have Sister Beehive, Grumpy Bear, Corpus Mundus, and Alt. Today we're going to be talking about how each individual has gotten into the 40K series. To those of you who don't know, 40K is a shortened hyphen term for the series high sci-fi fantasy series Warhammer 40,000. Starting off with basic introductions of, who we are and how we got into the series. And then following each story, we're going to be talking about how other people can get into this series. So I guess I'll just start it off. Back when I was around the age of, I want to say 12 or 13, I was in the Boy Scouts. I hadn't really thought about sci-fi fantasy pretty much at all. And during one of our scout meetings, I basically went over to one of my friend's house, and all the adults gathered around in the living room of this particular scout's house, and we all went outside and just hung out for a couple of hours while they talked. And one of them was like, "Hey, you guys want to see something really, really cool?" I was young, impressionable, so yeah, sure, why not? So he goes down to his basement, right? And he unveils this giant table. And on this table, I see figurines of Ultra Space Marines, just the bare bone basic units of Ultra Space Marines. And my eyes go wide. I'm like, what is this? What's going on? I don't even understand this. What is this? And he explains to me that it is a board game, or a tabletop game to be more specific, and it is a strategy turn-based game with dice rolling. And I didn't really understand what he was talking about, but all of the grandeur of it, right, just captivated me. And I was so impressed by it that I immediately forgot it for about 5 years. and and recently, I had always I'd always been searching around YouTube, always trying to refine what those were called, Ultra Space Marines. And then I found the YouTube video where Total Biscuit basically explains the Warhammer lore in about a minute. And I remembered the tabletop game, and I always remembered that it was a super interesting subject that I always wanted to play, but just didn't have the time for it. So what ended up happening, right, in the relative in the related section of the YouTube channels, right, I saw, or I saw a video of the newest episode of Text to Speech, which is essentially an abridged series of the entirety of the lore behind Warhammer 40K. And it is produced by Alpha Busa, who is basically a lore god. He has an extensive knowledge of this series and all of its intricacies. And it was the 25th episode, and I started watching it, and I was so weirded out because it was a giant clown basically making really stupid jokes in front of two unclothed men. And I was like completely lost. I was like, what is this? I can't perceive this. And then the intro happened, and I was captivated. I just sat down and watched the entire thing, not knowing anything about it. And I rewatched it over and over again because the writing of it was so well done, and just the way the characters interacted with each other, and just the way the music was off, and all of the extensive lore condensed into this fine, presentable format was so impressive to me, and I couldn't really understand it. By that time, by the way, I had already gotten back into Warhammer, and I started making figures, and I started uh, painting, and one thing led to another. I watched the text to speech series, and I found myself here.
Where you will never escape from ever again.
No, I won't.
Nope.
It's a sinkhole that never ever ends.
Yeah, you think you're
Save
out.
your kids.
Money.
Save your kids and save your wives, because you won't get out of this one.
Now, see, the people who ran the game store near me, they always said, get your kids playing the game. That way they'll never have money for drugs.
It's true.
They're not wrong.
It's funny because it's true.
So, that's my embellished story of how I got into Warhammer. It's something about it always bothers me, though, is that it left the first time I saw it, right? I left such an impression on me. I kind of hate myself for forgetting about it for a couple years, because I've always been a sci-fi nerd. I've always loved Star Wars. I've always loved Star Trek. I've always loved something to do with, having to do with aliens and, excessive over-the-top action and over-the-top lore and story. And something like this hit all the boxes. It ticked them off one by one. And it left something in me that I now can't fathom to ever forget this series. But at one point in my life, I just forgot about it. And I don't think it's not that I have a responsibility to always remember it, but I feel like I do, because it is such a good story.
It's just one of those sayings that drags you in and doesn't let you go.
It sticks with you.
There's nothing else quite like it as well.
Yeah. One of my favorite sayings about this series is the use of the words utopia and dystopia. On a moral scale, utopia is the ideological perfection of society, where everybody has met their own goal of perfection and happiness and sustainability. And then there's this dystopia where it's cruel, it's unforgiving, there's no happiness, there's no sense of justice. And then they would use those two words and those description and put them on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being utopia, 1 being dystopia. And then they would introduce a word called grimdark, one of the most staple words used throughout the entire Warhammer universe. And grimdark is a reference to basically the opening to every book or every facet of this series, where it's describing, in the grim dark future of humanity, there's only war. And on that morality scale of 1 to 10 that I was talking about, they always adjusted the numbers to where utopia was 1, dystopia was 10, and grimdark was 25. That's how I try to justify the outlandish and over the top things that happen throughout this series, and I don't think it does justice, but I still use it. So yeah, that's it for me. Sister?
I like how you got into TTS at episode 25, and you watched that, and you're sitting there confused, and it just didn't occur to you to go to episode 1?
Oh, so, mind you, this was at 4 a.m. in the morning when it had just been uploaded. So, it was fresh in my mind, and I went to work with this in my mind, right? And I was standing at my work, right? I looked over, and I'm like, I saw a video today, and I don't think I'm ever going to be able to forget a clown talking down to 2 unclothed men. Like, I don't think I'm ever going to forget that.
I hope you described to other people that was the video you watched.
I did. No, I tried. I tried. Don't get me wrong. I tried.
You don't really want it to be known that you started 40k with 2 unclothed men.
I would have loved
Oh,
to see
boy.
that conversation.
So
Yes.
that tells me that that tells me you found TTS rather recently, because I mean, what are we on episode 26 now or so?
So we're still on
So-
25.
Yeah,
Ah.
it's still on 25. So I've been part of the Warhammer fandom for a while before I found TTS, but um after finishing reading the books that I was talking about earlier, I was just kind of craving a little bit more information. I was just, one thing leads to another, rabbit hole, and
Yes,
you
yes.
find yourself at the ends of the internet, right? And you're finding all these different things related to what your subject matter is. And then in the corner of your eye, right, you spot a weird looking thing, a weird looking video, a weird looking article, and you're compelled by your instincts to be like, that looks weird. I have no idea what it is. I'm gonna click on it and see what it is. And then the rabbit hole got deeper, and here I am.
Fair
But-
enough.
On to B, I believe.
Yes.
Yes.
So I mean, I got into Warhammer through TTS, text to speech for anyone, or if the Emperor had a text to speech device, since we haven't actually gave the whole name yet.
Right.
I got into it through that series, but beforehand, I am very involved with my I guess nerd culture at my college campus, and I hear people talking about painting their models. I hear people talking about the Emperor, but whenever I'd ask what they were talking about, they would always tell me like the worst parts, like, oh yeah, people are tortured, people are. There was one where someone was trying to get me into it by telling me the story about some planet creating chaos space marines by getting women morbidly obese, putting grown men into them, and then they're bust out as chaos space marines. And I'm like, I'm not into this. What the fuck?
the dem-
Young boys, actually.
the dem-
Young
what is
boys,
it? That's
not
the
grown men.
Daemon Clubla or something like that. I can't fucking remember.
Yeah, another piece of horrid technology borrowed from Dune.
Thankfully, it only ever appeared once and was destroyed.
Yeah. I mean,
Thank the Emperor.
but it was stuff like that, and I guess they just didn't realize that they were pushing me away from being interested in this. And yeah, so I went years and years. I mean, my boyfriend has a small collection of Caiaphas Cain books on the bookshelf, and because of all of like the horror shit I've heard, I'm like, yeah, I'm not into this shit. Like, no, sorry, swearing.
Wait,
And
you
that-
didn't get into Warhammer for the sole purpose of reading about torture? What's wrong with you?
So one evening, actually 2005, like 2 years ago, actually now.
2005? 2 years ago?
2005. Oh my god. 2015. 2015, like I think this month or next month actually. And I looked over onto my boyfriend's computer and he's watching the first episode of Text to Speech and he is losing it. He is losing his damn mind. I'm curious about it and we put it up on the TV and we just binged the entire series right then and there. And at that time there was like 15 or 16 episodes. Like that was right
Oh.
then where they were starting to do the history before the
The
Emperor.
history
during
of
the Emperor.
everything.
Yeah. And I cannot tell you how many times I rewatched the whole series and all of the shorts and everything on Carl's channel, everything on Dr. White's channel, all of Eliphas's stuff, just within that year. And just keeping up with all of the updates and whatnot. I finally did get to start donating to Alpha Busa. We started chatting on Twitter, and he's a really cool dude. I'm really glad to be in this fandom entirely, because when I noticed like how little the fandom was, I was thrilled because it was something great. I saw it growing into something bigger, and I'd love to help in any way that I can.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't want to say it's a niche fandom, but it's certainly one of the hardest fandoms in my personal experience to get into, because you're coming in to just this huge absolutely massive story,
Mm-hmm.
and you just have to assume that everybody is ahead of you in the story and all the lore, and it's not as universally as easy to get into to say something along the lines of Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, where there's only a few instances of really big events where there has been 30 plus years of really big events in this history and in this story.
Yeah, 40k can be incredibly daunting to get into.
Definitely.
I wouldn't even say it's just because of that. It's because with Star Wars, with Lord of the Rings, you have somewhere to begin with them. Unlike 40k, where it's all very nebulous. It all exists within the same time, yet it doesn't. There is a chronological order of things, but it's not really set out very well within the books, the codices, or the video games at all. Like, one day you might be playing Warhammer Total War, but then you go back to Battle March, a game that came out around the same time as Dawn of War. And that takes place 200 years before the actual main storyline of Warhammer Fantasy Battle.
And then there's Mark of Chaos, which is even older.
Well, that is Battle March. Well,
Is it? Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
Battle
was
March
March
was-
the expansion.
yeah, it was the Orc expansion. But
Yeah. I only know it as Mark of Chaos.
great game though, loved it.
Oh, it was good fun, yeah.
This is the
At the
first time
time
I've
it-
actually heard of it.
At the time, it was the
Ooh.
first Warhammer Fantasy RTS we ever had.
Yeah,
Before that, we had what was it, Mark of the Horned Rat, or whatever it is, that really old
Yeah.
adventure game.
Hmm.
That was all we really had in terms of fantasy.
So in terms of getting in, after you binge watch the text to speech series, what happened after that?
So the first, I would say half, Alpha Busa recently has been poring over the lore to make sure that everything is as accurate as possible. But the first, I guess 12, 16 episodes or so, he did take a bit of liberties with the lore. There were some bits like how he tried to swing it as the birth of Slaanesh being the cause of the Eye of Terror. But Black Library has never really made that distinction, never made that official. There was also one bit about Malkador. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along the lines of him finally sacrificing himself after he selected the 12 people for the Inquisition.
Yeah, I just recently rewatched some of the episodes, and on that specific episode where you're talking about, Alpha put a note on the video where it explains that he kind of screwed up in the fact that he had the actors who were doing the scene with the Emperor of Mankind and Malkador. After Malkador presents the 12 people who would be the foundation of the Grey Knights and what would be known as the Inquisition, he's like, "Thank you, Emperor. Now I can do whatever you need me to do." And then he proceeds to make his great sacrifice, and the Emperor's like, "He is no more Malkador the Sigillite, he is Malkador the hero." And
Yeah.
on the video, he's like, "Yeah, no, that actually didn't happen in that event." He kind of waited a bit, or it didn't immediately happen after that.
No,
Yeah,
there was no
and-
grand proclamation.
Sorry, say that again. I talked over you.
No, I was just saying that there was no grand proclamation of Malkador's martyrdom. It
Okay.
was only after the fact.
But yeah, Alpha Busa is really good on the lore, and there were some bits that, granted, TTS wouldn't be quite the beginner's guide, but it is a really good start to Warhammer 40k. There's some bits that kind of are left vague, just because it's part of the universe as a whole, and it's kind of not necessary to bridge into it. I don't have any particular examples at the moment, but it does happen with any series with such a deep and vibrant lore. And so I'd be
Right.
turning to my boyfriend and be like, "Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this?" And I actually got to the point. He's been into it for about 10 years at this point. And it got to the point where I was asking questions that he didn't know. I got to the end of his knowledge, and I just started turning to all the
God, that's
wikis that
never
I
good.
could. Yeah, I actually know more about Warhammer 40k than he does at this time.
Oh man, dump him. He's no more. He's not useful anymore. Get
You have
rid of
surpassed
him.
him.
It's like the Sith from Star Wars. Once you've gleaned all the knowledge, he is no longer useful to you.
Just cut him in half and throw him out the window.
Yay!
Now you are the master.
Oh dear. Dear, oh dear.
But yeah, so far it's been mostly, my information's been coming from wikis, from other people. And I've been slowly reading the books. Admittedly, I've been reading the Horus Heresy series, which I'm not 100% totally yes, this is the way to get all of the lore. It's a good read, don't get me wrong. I will highly recommend them to anyone. But if you were to read them for learning about Warhammer 40k, it's like you're kind of taking
It is. Yes.
We'll
Good.
be covering all this a bit later in the podcast.
Right.
Okay.
So that I wish. See, I'm kind of jealous of you now because you actually had somebody there who had already had pre-existing knowledge, whereas me, I just kind of had to do it on my own, and that's sometimes probably one of the worst ways. Well, not one of the worst ways, but a very not correct way, because then you get into other people who know a little bit more about it than you do, and they proclaim to know everything, and you have no idea if they're telling you what they're telling you is true or not.
Yeah.
And that's how misinformation gets spread around, and that's very damaging to somebody new.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I agree 110%.
Not to name any names here, but there is a YouTuber who I have watched in the past and have taken his word on something, and then one day out of the blue I'm like, that sounds a little too outlandish. I'm gonna research this, and then after doing so, I ended up having to go back and rewatching some of the other videos that I watched from this content creator and go, that's wrong. That's wrong. That's incorrect. That's slightly true. And it's incredibly frustrating because this is a series that I love, and it's a series that I want other people to enjoy. And if misinformation's being spread around, then that means that it's excruciatingly muddying the water. It's almost doing more harm than good.
Yeah. There's no point in watching the videos if you're going to sit and fact check them all afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you
Right.
maybe should do that, but why? It's pointless. Just look it up to start with if that's going to be the case.
Yeah, I have, since now I'm getting into the lore, I'm trying to find videos. It is one hell of an uphill battle to find correct videos. There was one YouTuber that I just found. Actually, there's two of them that I just found trying to understand the lore so I don't have to buy the books or somehow learn the lore other than through a video. And they're just spouting off incorrect information. It's like, okay, that's a rumor. Black Library never confirmed that. That's also fake. That was the only source of that was from a forum back in 2005. And
Right.
misinformation is rife within Warhammer 40k.
Because that's something else. What we need to keep in mind is that the lore is ultimately controlled by Games Workshop, and they are a company, and they will take steps to retcon the lore and their universe in whatever way they can to push new product. Because after all, at the end of the day, it is a business. They're trying to make money off of these games and these books. And while the Black Library authors have the freedom and the liberty, well, to a degree, to write these stories and how they happened and go a little bit more in depth into a character study, again, these books can just be hand-waved a couple decades later and said, nope, didn't happen anymore. Nope.
There's a common misunderstood saying about Warhammer 40,000 and that everything is canon and nothing is canon. people tend to interpret it as there is no concrete source of information. It's more that there is a concrete source of information. It's always the current information. Because as soon as something changes later on that has a contradiction in previous material, Games Workshop will change the previous material to match the current material. And they'll do this at a whim.
Yep.
So, everything is canon unless it's contradicted. Yeah. And if it's been contradicted, you use the new material. A lot of people tend to misunderstand that because it's not something that's widely published.
All right.
Unless you just want
to...
Stop being so polite, both of you.
I had to go digging into the Warhammer 30,000 tabletop community's forums for this quote, because the head of the, at the time, Horus Heresy Story Group, Laurie Golding, said this and explained it. So I had to hunt down the horse's mouth to get it from.
Good job. So,
gee, thanks.
Next on our list is Alt.
Yo. I'm basically the exact opposite of Sister. I'm just here for the small boys being shoved into obese women.
Wait, you're exclusively in this fandom for the torture?
There's always
good
one.
Man. Give this man a medal.
He probably plays Darth Eldar.
I bet he likes the Emperor's children too.
Who doesn't?
Actual story is that I got into it for the Dawn of War games. When the first one came out, I was still really young, and my grandfather's really into computer gaming and stuff at the time. This would have been back when, PS2 games were the golden age of technology. So I really liked Dawn of War for some reason as a child, even though I didn't really understand how to play games at that time. I just knew that I needed units and I needed to shepherd them in a direction, and I needed to hope that they could outshoot whatever I ran into. Still like playing it, still like the look of everything, and then, like Gary, I basically forgot about it for years, just because I grew past the age where I was constantly visiting my grandpa. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a bleep.
Just edit that whole part out.
We've passed the threshold. Continue.
You can't edit it anymore.
It's ruined.
Yeah, I wasn't visiting my grandfather a ton after that point, so I wasn't there, and I didn't have a computer myself, so I wasn't playing it anymore. And then one day I just saw Dark Crusade on the shelves of a game shop, just randomly. Not that much older at this point, maybe about 12, I think. But I understand how to play games better, so I'm actually playing it properly now. But I still don't think about Warhammer as a whole, just like you wouldn't look up the lore behind Ratchet and Clank, because you don't expect there to be a massive extended universe behind it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I really like the Tau at this point. They were my
Get out.
They were my
Get out.
We've got
favorite race to play in Dark Crusade.
It's time for you to leave.
I fell into the trap that everyone does of thinking that the Tau were actually the good guys of Warhammer.
Oh, God.
And then you beat the game as them.
Yeah. The greater
and then you
good is
sterilized everyone.
Yeah, the greater good is totally honest and straightforward. They're not Orwellian space communists. That's just a lie.
Oh God.
But anyway, eventually just decided to start looking it up for some random reason, and that's when I found that there was the massive universe behind it and everything like that. And then one day, when I was with my grandfather, we went through to Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland, if anyone doesn't know. And that's where the nearest Games Workshop hobbyist type store is from me. And that was my first experience of seeing the tabletop models, which I've never really gotten into because I don't have much money or space. But they were...
Not a true fan.
Yeah.
No,
it was a large shop though, so... They had multiple tables set up with 2 of them were big displays with a lot of units on them, so I got a good look then and was just really impressed with it. So just ever since then, I've been looking into the lore my own way. I've read a couple of the books, but not many of them. I don't have the greatest memory for it either, so I tend to forget and just need to check things. But I have a decent baseline, I would say, established.
So sorry to interrupt you, but going back to the Dawn of War games, I think I left this out of my story, but that gap, right, where I forgot about Warhammer, at some point my parents opened our house to a ledger, and basically having somebody random, I think at the time it was a really close family friend's son who wanted to stay in Virginia and finish his senior year of high school, come and live with us. And he was a PC gamer. And he introduced me to Dawn of War in between that time that I forgot about it. And I was like blown away by this real-time strategy game. And I was so good at using the Necrons in the Dark Crusade campaign that I beat it on, like, I think the second to last difficulty. And after I got done playing it, I was like, all right, that was fun. Time to forget about it again. And now recently I was like, oh man, I remember playing Dawn of War back then. You know, it's gonna be so cool. I'm gonna play the Necrons and I'm gonna beat the shit out of it now that I'm older, right? And I re-downloaded it and it has absolutely kicked my butt. I don't know how, but over the years I got worse.
That's what you get for playing
at
Necrons.
a game that I have.
You're decomposing as fast as them.
I
They
know.
don't decompose.
Be like
It's
me, Gary.
concerning.
Oh dear.
Be like me and play the Tau.
No, don't.
No. Blasphemy, sir.
That evil commie laugh. Just.
I must escape
You know
to
who
the
the-
one place where communism can still prosper. To the moon!
You see, Onel.
To the one place capitalism has not reached.
Yeah, that was
moon.
it. Just to wrap up my story quickly, because there's not much more of it. One day, randomly found Rogel Dorn memes from TTS, and I was like,
no.
what the hell is this from? Who is this guy? Well, I knew it was Rogel Dorn, but I was thinking, why does he like to go fast too? I don't understand. So,
Wait, there are 2 characters that like going fast? What?
There are many characters that like going fast.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, then I found text-to-speech. I watched that. I found Zoran that joined his server. Met you guys. That's how I got
And
into
you
this
were doomed
podcast.
forever.
I feel like instead of, you know, the origin stories of this cast and how they got into Warhammer, it's now transitioned to an entirely hour-long advertisement for text-to-speech.
Yeah.
Apparently.
If you
Oh,
haven't
don't worry.
watched text-to-speech, just go do that.
Oh, don't worry. I think I'm going to be the exception to the TTS.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe it's my turn
Moving
now,
on.
isn't it?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh,
The
I'm
old
excited.
fart.
Yes, I am the ancient wizened one with my mighty beard.
Story time. Let's gather around.
Gather the popcorn, children. Gather round the fire of the grumpy bear.
May I sit upon your lap?
Yes, you may.
Ugh.
Cast your minds back to the grim darkness of the age of man, the year 2001.
Ooh.
Oh my goodness.
Way
Truly.
back in the mists of time when the internet
Dark
was young.
times.
Dial-up is
Yes.
still a thing.
It's actually quite funny because when I was very, very young, like before 2001, you know, very, very young, a tiny sprog, tiny little snotling, I had a couple of Rogue Trader figures, and I didn't know what they were. I had a little space orc with his little gun, and a little space knight with his little sword, and I didn't know what the hell they were. They were just cool. And I just put them up. I just put them in a box and forgot about them, and now I've lost them.
Aw.
But yeah, I know. But when you get fast forward to 2001, it's April. It's a nice sunny day, and I hate sunlight, so I'm running away from the sunlight as fast as I can, being the filthy nerd that I am. And I find this magazine in a chain of shops called W.H. Smith here in the UK. It's mostly just magazines and newspapers and books, that kind of thing.
Like a newsstand.
Yeah, kind of like that. But it's a big franchise chain of shops, and I find this magazine with a cover just kind of catches my eye because it's a bunch of zombies. It's just this bunch of rotten zombies. One's holding a bone in his hand. He's got this wicked grin. He's missing an eye. He's all grody, rotten, lanky, greasy hair. I really resonated with that image at the time. And
You have such high expectations of your ego, don't you?
I know, I'm great, aren't I? But no, it was called White Dwarf. I didn't know what it was, and I picked it up, and it was like, oh, £2.50. I've got £2.50 in my pocket. I'll get that. It looks cool. And I bought that, and I didn't know at the time what White Dwarf was or what was inside the magazine. I didn't even flick through it. I just picked it up, looked at the cover, and went, that's cool. I want to read this.
Mine now.
Yeah, pretty much. Walk out the shop with it, don't pay for it, get caught by the police. No, and I opened it up, and I've been hooked ever since. It covered Sorry, just remembering this all is really nice. I open it up, and the magazine covers the release of the Vampire Count's army for Warhammer Fantasy Battle 4th Edition, which I thought was really cool because they showed off the Black Coach, which was kind of a neat looking unit. It was a battle report of Vampire Counts versus Skaven, which was just funny because the Skaven they fell apart because they used lots of slaves and clan rats. But what got me hooked into Warhammer 40,000 was the coverage of the First Tyrannic War, what we now know as the First Tyrannic War, the invasion of Macragge by High Fleet Behemoth. Behemoth, yeah. And it had so much coverage of this. It had a short story written by Gav Thorpe of the Last Chances, from his Last Chances novel series, and they're defending this fort against a Tyranid invasion, and it's only like it's only 4 pages, 4 big A4 size pages of story, and it's how they presented it. It really hooked me into this kind of, they're just dealing with this horror, and they roughly know how to deal with it. Like, they know to look out for lictors, camouflaged aliens. They know how to deal with Tyranid warriors. But then it gets to a point in the story where the main gate is burst open and there's a Carnifex, and the main character just kind of goes, oh shit. Everyone, bring your weapons to bear. And then the Colonel, with his power sword, charges the Carnifex, Colonel Schaefer. And but the main character's perspective switches away, so we don't know what happens. But we know that the Carnifex eventually dies, and Colonel Schaefer is just bleeding from everywhere. But he's still alive. The Last Chances is great. But what absolutely hooked me, was the actual coverage of the Battle of Macragge itself, and the last stand of the Ultramarines' first company. Because it was just this long description of just this small handful of heroes, very small handful of heroes, like a single Marine holding a trench line with like a platoon of normal soldiers. As this onrushing horde of Tyranids comes along, there's this very vivid description of a Titan, an enormous war robot in the Imperium, piloted by multiple people, just firing massive, continent-shattering weapons into this oncoming swarm, and just being covered in tiny Tyranid beasts until its vents clog up and it overheats and shuts down, and then then it's boarded and the crew are devoured. It's just so evocative.
Brutal.
Yeah, it was very evocative, very brutal, very visceral, and it just
Metal.
sucked me in. Yeah, very metal.
Yeah.
For those of you listening, just imagine any metal band that you could have ever possibly think of, and the album art, that's Warhammer.
Pretty much.
Actually,
yeah.
Yeah.
But there were two specific bits in this magazine that really grabbed me and dragged me in by the throat, effectively. One pertains to the last stand of the first company. It's Captain Invictus. He's a Terminator armored captain with a power fist and an old relic plasma blaster weapon. And he fights a Tyranid hive tyrant, which is basically an enormous leader beast of the Tyranid swarm. And it's done from the perspective of another Terminator's helmet cam. And it's just, wow. Just he dies, obviously, he dies. He gets fucking ripped apart. But it was just this cool little snippet.
That reminds me, so like the way you've described it, I was that heavily reminds me of Aliens.
Yeah.
And how that was shot from the perspective of the different Marines going through the space colony.
Yeah. There's one final bit from this issue of White Dwarf that sealed the deal for me. And it was covering the release of the plastic Space Marine Dreadnought.
Oh.
The current plastic Dreadnought. The ordinary, bog standard box Dreadnought. Washing machine on legs. The thing that shouldn't be able to walk but can.
We love you, Waddles.
Because everyone assumes it doesn't have knees. And it's just this 6-page splat about it, mostly covering the model, and then the lore. And then I find out that this awesome-looking war robot has a half-dead hero inside. And I'd just finished reading about Captain Invictus, and I'm like, oh, maybe Captain Invictus is in a dreadnought now, because I was young. I was like, oh my god, I hope he's alright.
You had dreams?
Yeah. And my first dreadnought I named Invictus.
Oh. Aww.
But I didn't paint him as an Ultramarine, I painted him as a Dark Angel.
What a waste.
Because after I got through that issue, I was hooked, and I basically begged my parents to take me to a Games Workshop nearby so I could look more into this, and I got the 3rd edition starter set, and I've been playing and been involved in Warhammer since then. So for the last 16, 17 years, it's just been Warhammer 40k has been a major passion in my life. I'm finally done.
Just out of interest, like, I don't want to make you feel more old. I do remember what 2001 was like, even though I would have been 5 at the time. But
right.
like, when you were getting into this, how available was like the internet in terms of looking stuff up?
It was brand spanking new at the time.
Yeah,
dial up.
I thought it would be. So it would have
it
been all magazine based and actually going to stores.
Magazines, flyers.
Yeah, it was e-zines, IRC chat, dial-up, Habbo Hotel.
See, that's something.
Not Habbo Hotel. Habbo Hotel was 2004.
Buying dial-up by the hour from AOL.
Yeah.
That just reminds me of just a better time in general, because it in terms of like information gathering. Today we could just sit down to any computer and be like, I wonder what a dreadnought looks like, and then just typing it up and getting an image, and you're like, oh, that's what it looks like. Whereas previously, you'd go to somebody who knew something about it, and they'd be describing it to you. It's this awesome, super epic fucking box on legs, and its hands are a giant chainsaw sword, and a rocket launcher with rockets the size of your head that make you explode. And you just sit there in awe, just be like, oh. So I feel like I didn't miss out, but I feel like if I were to go back and if I were to have the knowledge that I have now, I'd feel more certain that this would be something that I would enjoy. And just go back to my older self and be like, look, you're not going to know about it, but there's this robot with legs and it kills things good. Just go.
Your older self?
Or my younger self.
You become your own father because of your
You
own
forget
decision.
all
Oh,
of this
no.
again.
Oh God! No, all right, I pledge right here and now in front of the entire internet. If I forget about this from this point on, I will, and then come back and remember. I will personally excuse myself from the fandom. Like, I'll just leave, never come back. I'm not allowed to come back.
If you end up with amnesia and we can only remind you of either Warhammer or your family, which one do you want?
I think we all know the answer to that question.
These minis are my family, damn it.
But yeah, I started Warhammer long before the internet became a major thing, a major facet of
Before the
modern life.
dawn of time.
Yes, that's why I call it the dark age of technology.
It's the age of floppy
All
disks.
Yeah, no, yeah. It was the age of floppy disks and CRT
Oh
monitors.
god.
Oh. All right.
Sometimes I long
Last.
for that simpler age.
Last but certainly not least, Corpus.
Yes, thank you. You saved the best for last, as always. Now, my story is similar to Alt's in that I was introduced through Dawn of War, specifically Dark Crusade. I was just wandering. We were at Target as a family, and I had some money in my pocket. And I was looking through the games that they had laid out, and I was like, "All right, what's this? It's a robot, and he's fighting big guys in armor. They look like knights. That's actually pretty badass. Look on the back. Holy crap! There's lots of alien guys in armor with long rifles and big mech suits. This looks pretty cool. I'm gonna buy this and play it." And of course, much like Alt, I also started as a fan of the Tau. I was young, naive,
Yes.
I didn't know better.
and
And I played that game.
I'm sensing a trend here.
I feel like the Tau's like the first girlfriend of everybody.
Everybody goes through a Tau phase in college.
Dreadnought will always be my waifu.
But anyway, I spent every hour I could playing that game. Well, actually, no. I couldn't play that game for about 2 years because the computer and the operating system we had at the time wasn't good enough for it at all. It was missing some key piece of software that wouldn't allow me to play it at all. So I waited, and I forgot about it for a while. Then we got a new family computer and was like, goddamn, yeah, I'm going to play this game. Oh, forgive me for that. Yeah, I keep forgetting.
Remember when family computers were a thing?
At this point, we've broken that threshold. It's fine.
Yeah.
Beep, beep,
But
beep,
anyway.
beep, beep, beep.
So, yeah. I start playing, I play as the Tau, and I have a lot of fun. And then I get to the ending of the Tau, and I think, oh no. What did I do?
What have I done?
Yeah. Maybe humanity wasn't wrong in hating aliens after all. And so I go
My
back.
life is a lie.
Yeah, I go back and I play as the Imperial Guard, and I love the Guard. I love the feeling of it, that these regular men and women with their little guns, with their big tanks, they stand as a bulwark against all the threats to mankind. They are the hammer, the anvil. They are everything to mankind. They're not as great as the Space Marines individually, but they're our backbone. Then I eventually end up cycling through all the races, but what really sticks with me is Chaos. Mainly because of Eliphas the Inheritor and how deliciously evil and suave he is. He is one suave Chaos Lord, let me tell you that much. When you're fighting the Eldar,
His Thunder Psyker has a video review up of Dark Crusade where he says that Eliphas's voice sounds like crushed velvet, and it's probably the most accurate description I could ever think of
Definitely.
for his voice.
If there was anyone who I'd want to have stab me in the face while talking to me, sensually, it'd be him.
Yeah. And so I keep playing the game. It's my favorite game. It's the only game I really own on computer. Well, the family computer, that is. So I'll take any chance I get to play it. And one day we're also at the bookstore. We need stuff for school for our summer reading program. And what do I find? What do I see in the science fiction section but a word-bearer Chaos Space Marine on the front of a book?
You found Dark Apostle.
Yes, I did. And from that day forward, my world changed forever. Never again would I be the same. And much like Chaos, it just grew and grew and grew. So yeah,
Like a tumor.
Yep, a beautiful tumor. So I bought Dark Apostle and Dark Disciple because I saw that it had the sequel right next to it at the time. Or was it later? Well, either way, I bought it, I read it, I loved it. I love learning about all the infernal technology, how the Imperium worked to a degree, how the Mechanicus operated to a degree, because I didn't really know much about them aside from the fact that the tech priests worked on vehicles, and they were the repair and construction unit for the Imperial Guard. So it really opened my eyes, and a lot of the technology was really hard to understand what exactly it was, but every now and then context clues would really help. And I moved on from Chaos to Space Marines. I bought Brotherhood of the Snake. It's a wonderful book. It really gets into what it is to be a Space Marine, what it is to be seen and interact with regular humans. And the third book in the Wordbearer trilogy, Dark Creed, it also goes into that to a degree. They are not just warriors, they are also symbols to regular mankind. It's not their Imperium, it is our Imperium, it is the Imperium of man. They are our defenders, but we are the Emperor's inheritors, so to speak. And at this time, I still had no fucking idea that the tabletop was an actual thing. And when I heard about that from a friend of mine who was also into it, it blew my mind. I looked up the models, I looked up all the supplies I needed, and I just started collecting Chaos. And I eventually found there was a Games Workshop store about half an hour, 40 minutes away from me, and ever since then I've been going there every now and then. They know my name, they know my face, they know me too well, and I've spent far too much money at that shop.
And you still haven't settled on a colour scheme for your warband.
I'm very indecisive.
There's so many colors.
There are,
So
and that's the
many
thing.
pretty
That's
colours.
that's the trap with Chaos. Certain colors you typically represent certain allegiance to different gods, and I want to go
Oh,
undivided.
just slap fluorescent pink on them and call them Emperor's children.
No, I'm not Zaraki.
Just dunk them all in gold.
Give them a pestilent white with yellow tint.
I actually did
Just-
have something like that for an old warband I called Eaters of the Dead. They were essentially a Nurgle warband that was all about cannibalism and festering
Oh.
flesh.
Oh, that sounds
That's
good.
very cool. That sounds very cool.
I inspired,
Mwah.
because I was a
Mwah.
I can't believe
Tasty.
I was always a
I'm
big
also-
Lovecraft fan. I found Lovecraft before 40k, and I was thinking, alright, so they got power claws, their helmets like snarling hounds, hyena-like creatures, so on and so forth. Yeah.
I can't believe we all just kind of went, ooh, lovely, when he described a 7-foot-tall walking pustule that eats people.
I mean, that just really shows the character of all of us.
I always thought of it more as the famine aspect, like, rather than pure pestilence, more famine, constantly looking for satisfaction, but always being hungry to a degree. You know,
It's
that
very
might
fitting
be-
for Nurgle.
That might, yeah, it's a bit of an intersection between Slaanesh and Nurgle. It's a difference between wanting to be satisfied and wanting release, I suppose.
Hmm.
But yeah, that about sums it up for me.
So you went chaos and never looked back?
Oh, I always look back because, I don't know, it's hard to... I'm sort of a grass is always greener kind of guy, and I don't want to be, but I tend to be pretty fickle with chaos and loyalist.
Hmm. Well,
Well, power armor is just universally cool.
Oh, it's not even that. It's what they fight for, what they stand for, the different philosophies and ideologies of the different legions, warbands, chapters. And I really like the
Yeah.
Word Bearers and how they do want to, in their eyes, they are doing what's best for humanity. Through their will, we will achieve our destiny as a species. We will embrace
This
chaos
is-
instead of shying away from it like the Eldar did.
I think this is probably the biggest interesting thing about 40k is that each faction is so well defined within such a broad range that you can explore any single aspect of what it means to be human within that faction and then take it to that faction's natural exaggeration. Like with Chaos Space Marines, they are absolute freedom personified, whereas Loyalist Marines are absolute selflessness.
I also really enjoy the fact that when talking about all the chapters and when talking about all the legions and chaos
Regiments
regiments and loyalists and chaos, it's all human, but not like loyalists are not 100% good people. They do some horrible stuff, but chaos is not 100% evil either. They do some things in their minds. It clicks. It makes sense. It's like, no, you don't understand. This is the right way to do things. This is the way that we survive. And that's it's always been a very interesting dynamic for me reading the books and looking at all this lore, because Games Workshop does a very, very good job at making sure that it's very transparent. Not everything is clear cut, like Lord of the Rings. There is no definite good guys. There is no definite bad guys. All of
there are
it is
definite
gray.
bad guys.
Oh, yeah,
There are definite bad
the
guys.
Tyranids,
There are-
Old Krons.
There are bad guys, but when talking about most of the humans, it's gray. The spectrum is gray.
That's
I
actually
wouldn't even
one
say.
of the. Sorry.
Oh, you can go ahead if you like.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That's what I really enjoy about Warhammer 40k as a whole, is because nothing is good, nothing is straight bad. There's always this light of everything has the light and dark side to it. That's actually why I'm like really into Tzeentch, because it's always just, there's always something going on in the background and there's always something going on the front. So like, what is true and what is false, or even if those qualities hold in 40k, like, you just don't fucking know.
Mm-hmm. Well, you see, that's the interesting thing. It isn't just I wouldn't even call it a spectrum of gray. It is bright orange, vivid reds, deep purples, enchanting blues. It's not whether it's good or evil, it is simply being human. Like the Chaos Gods, for example. In the books, they try to write them as these Lovecraftian eldritch horrors, but in reality, they are us. We shape them just as all the other sentient races do, with our emotion, with our action, with our thoughts. The Catan are more eldritch abominations, seeing as how they are part of a greater design that we can't really understand at all. But Chaos, as you say, it has it has extremes, a positive and negative, a contracting and an expanding. There, you can make a lot of parallels to the classical religions, to classical elements and humorism. Slanesh being water, being cold, being emotional, being fluid, vibrant, even. Corn being fire, hot, expansive, aggressive. It needs fuel, it needs blood, it needs rage, it needs to feed and consume everything. Nurgle being...
So,
oh, go ahead.
Continue, but after your thought.
Nurgle being earth, it is solid, but it transitions, it degrades, it is low state, it is low matter, and low matter is imperfect in its very nature, but Nurgle loves us despite our imperfections. And Tzeentch is air, it's lofty, it's a realm of ideas where nothing can go wrong, which is why he makes these plans. He plans and plans and plans in a realm of pure thought without the boundaries of physicality to stop him.
Nice. So, to bring this podcast to its second topic, we are going to be discussing, in our personal experiences, what is the best way to start getting into this super just amalgamation of just ridiculous information. And we are going to be listing certain book series, different types of books, what they contain, and just a general overall starting ground about trying to get into it. And I'm gonna start off in saying that I think, personally, in my opinion, one of the best books to start reading to try and get a foothold into this is The Beast Rises. It is a multi-book series about a war that takes place after one of the biggest events in the lore. Now, it's not going to be immediately apparent of what is happening in the universe, what has happened in the universe, but it is a clear-cut story about one specific event. And once you get an idea of what happens throughout this specific event, then you kind of get this feeling of, all right, I've gotten on my two little rocks in this waiting ocean of information that I can refer to and move forward from that. Grumpy?
Oh. Well, if you want to start the hobby, and you want to start with the game, the tabletop, there's this. Well, traditionally, you would start with whatever army you wanted, say Necrons, and you would pick up a HQ, a Lord, 2 troops, 2 units of warriors, and the Codex. But that's a lot of money to put down.
Mm-hmm.
And Games Workshop have been doing a lot of good work in fixing how to start into the hobby, because they had a huge problem with Warhammer Fantasy, and we'll probably cover this in a future episode when we talk about Warhammer Fantasy, where people just couldn't start playing it because of various reasons. And they've done a lot to fix that and make starting the hobby more of an impulse purchase. Probably going to ramble a little bit with this, but and this is going to sound like a sales pitch. It really is going to sound like a sales pitch, but there's no other way to phrase it. To start with Warhammer 40k as a tabletop hobby, the easiest route is to pick up the First Strike box. It's a little small box. It's about £25, $30 roughly. You get 6 Space Marines, 3 Plague Marines, and 5 Plague Zombies, and it's a very simple, very beginner-friendly game. All of the models are in this easy-to-build format where they're about 6 pieces, and you don't really need any glue to assemble them. They just push together. It's all pegs and holes. You just put them together, and they're very solid gaming pieces. And you can paint them, obviously. You just spray them in a cup primer you like, and then you just go from there.
Remember to thin your paints.
Yes.
Always
we'll
thin your
probably cover
paints.
that. We'll probably cover that later as well in another podcast.
Just an entire podcast dedicated to painting.
Yes, Grumpy's Art Corner.
What?
Oh, God.
Oh, that would be
What
cute.
exciting lives we lead.
Gotta paint a happy little Plague Marine right here. See how happy he is?
We'll give him a happy little Nurgling as a friend. Everyone deserves a small little friend. Crying inside. I never had a Nurgling friend.
The imagery for that podcast can just be a slideshow of unfinned paint models.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
They don't deserve that.
But from First Strike, there's the No Fear box, which isn't a push fit box. It's you need glue for that. But there's more models. It's a bigger scale. It's got some heroes. It's different choices for units. And then there's Dark Imperium, which is the big £95 all-inclusive starter box, which includes the full rulebook, dice to play with. They all have dice to play with. You get various range markers and bits and bobs. You don't, but you get full-sized armies out of that box. They are full-sized for an entry-level game. They are nicely rounded out, and they're very playable. I'm still using my Dark Imperium Space Marines as they are for the most part. Then there's the easy-to-build kits, which I pointed out. There's easy-to-build kits for 40k and Age of Sigmar. And you don't need glue for them, you just need a pair of clippers. And you can get a pair of plastic clippers very cheaply from a hobby, from a DIY shop or a hobby shop, an art shop, for example, or Games Workshop themselves. It's very easy to get into the tabletop game now.
Yeah.
Just because there's a lot more options, whereas before there wasn't. You would have to know what you wanted, whereas now you can just pick up. Even if you don't intend to play Space Marines later on, First Strike still lets you learn the game, because the models they give you are varied enough in their roles.
This is actually something I wanted to bring up when you were talking about when you got into 40k, and with the internet, to figure out what a model looked like, you had to go to someone to have it described to you. What I wanted to say is that the internet definitely did, or obviously has helped, because now we can look up the model's pictures and we can even shop around and find the cheapest one. Maybe buy one from a commissioner and get it fully painted and the like. So
yeah,
it's fantastic.
The internet has helped the hobby in immense ways, but in some ways it's also hurt it as well. I'm going to insist that we cover this later on in another podcast.
Yeah, that would
Right.
be nice.
Without a doubt.
So,
Yeah.
sister,
eBay is your friend.
any book suggestions? Any game suggestion?
I'm personally not. I haven't read a whole lot of books, so I don't really have much to say. I mean, TTS I think is a really nice beginner's start. I've been able to show it to a good number of my friends, and they were like, "Oh, okay, I understand some of this."
I actually the other day I showed my girlfriend one episode, and I was like, I talked to that guy, and she's like, "You're really, really pushing it, dude." Just, I got the Star Wars things, I got the Game of Thrones thing, but this, I mean, kind of pushing it, man.
You're not pushing it. You're just very, very passionate for things.
Yeah.
Don't let her read the Iron Warriors books.
I'll save her from the Tau. Don't worry.
Otherwise, she'll start putting the iron within.
Oh, no.
Damn it. Buffy.
Innuendos. Corpus.
Innuendo.
Right. Oh, I've read quite a few of the books over the years, both fantasy and 40k, and fantasy books are also great, but as Grumpy said, that'll probably be a subject for another podcast.
Right.
As I said before, my first book was Dark Apostle, but I only really got interested in it because of the game. And the games are actually a pretty great place to start, especially the first couple of Dawn of War games, Battle Marks,
Oh, absolutely.
because they are somewhat self-contained. Their little narratives are. And you can understand them. The characters, their dialogue, their equipment, everything. It sort of explains itself with little text blurbs or actual dialogue from the characters. But the books, Gaunt's Ghost, without a doubt, is an amazing series, and it is a great series to be introduced to the realities of human life in Warhammer 40,000, especially as an Imperial Guardsman. You see them in the trenches, you see them retaking cities, you see them dropping in. Now this is a scout regiment too, so they're always at the very front of things. They have to infiltrate, they get the brunt of almost everything. And yet they still persevere. It's a great story to see the triumph of the human spirit, the will to survive, the will to fight for what you believe in and what you want to protect, even if what you have that is most valuable to you is already gone. You need to help other people still. And that's one of the great things about the individuals within the Imperium of Man. They have heroes, they have icons, they have people who represent what it is to be human, and a good human within the Imperium, that is. I mean, we might really... yeah.
But then there's some books where the good human actually turns out to be corrupted by chaos.
Oh yeah, without a
which
doubt.
is-
And that brings me to the Chaos books. It's great to see why they have fallen, why they choose this life, or whether they had no choice at all. Like a lot of Chaos Space Marines, they really had almost no choice in the matter. I mean, yeah, you could have said, I don't want to follow the War Master, but then you would have been left on a single planet to die with all the rest of them.
if you are lucky.
Yeah, or if you happen to be born on Terra first, rather than your Primarch's homeworld. The Word Bearers, the last book it talks about that, and they do a whole sermon on it, and how, yes, it's terrible that we had to cleanse the legion of these brothers, who, through no fault of their own, were impure in some way. And it's why, for them, we continue the fight. It's for them that the Brotherhood continues to exist, that we keep the Legion strong and pure. And Lorgar laments for them. Lorgar laments for all of us, for all of the children of Chaos. So on and so forth.
Right.
Word Bearers, by the way, great preachers, great speeches. I love Chaos. They do that. The Imperium and Chaos, best speeches without a doubt. They'll really move.
Absolutely. So, Alt, have anything to add?
You guys have covered it pretty well so far. The thing I would add is that a lot of the games for Warhammer, there are a couple that are quite bad, so you should probably look any up before you buy them or just watch them. But the ones that are good, I think a lot of them, they all do something really well to be enjoyable. There's not... Out of the better ones, I can't think of any that didn't have something that could hold you and really get you into the game. Books-wise, the recommendations I'd thought of earlier were Legion of the Damned and Purging of Cadalus, because they're quite character or event-driven rather than focusing on the entire lore of Warhammer 40k. You don't need to know everything to enjoy those stories.
Right.
So, sorry, you go.
Just as a generalistic statement, we're listing off a lot of things such as chaos gods, different chapters. It's all right to not know everything right off the bat. I, who have spent, the last 6 years in this fandom, still do not know the difference of, the difference between what is essentially like, well, that tank and that tank are a different color. Why is that? Oh, they're part of different chapters. Why is that? Well, different chapters, different legions, different space marines.
What's a chapter?
Yeah.
What's a space marine?
Yeah.
What's a traitor? That sort of stuff.
It's never necessary for somebody to know everything. And that's all right if you don't know everything. That's
Definitely
one of the best places to be in my personal opinion, because if you don't know anything, then everything that follows is a new experience. Everything that you learn from this point forward makes you a part of something bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of you, apart from me, have, because I went into this in a completely archaic way, have come into the hobby as a whole in very fluff devoid ways, but you've discovered the background material in your own fashion and found it interesting in your own way. Coming in from True Dawn of War, for example, there's next to no lore until you click campaign.
And even then, it's a self-contained story.
The cinematics, while fun, don't really explain much lore at all. It's just an action sequence, but you get into the campaign, you listen to the characters interact, and you start to discover things. And that, I honestly think that's probably a good way to start, is you pick your favourite way of entering. You pick your favourite way. So video games, novels, the tabletop game.
Audiobooks.
Audiobooks. Podcasts like this, YouTubers, however you like, and you go from there at your own pace, and you discover everything in your own way, in your own pace. Not knowing everything, like Gary said, it's fine. I still don't know everything, and I've been in this hobby for almost 20 bloody years.
Yep.
It's fine not to know everything.
There's always going to be
You'll
more.
Find it out. You'll find it out eventually.
And the thing of it is, there's no reason to stress what you do or don't know, because at the end of the day, a couple of years later, Games Workshop might completely redo or undo everything you just learned.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything you like about the Tau will suddenly be gone.
Yep. Sorry, Bretonia.
Oh, God, Bretonians. We'll cover that. We'll definitely cover the fall of the Bretonians.
And the squats. Never forget.
No, we are not touching the squats. I'm putting my foot down right here, mate. We're never touching the squats.
Well,
we're never touching them.
We're
not even looking at them. We're not even going to think of them. From now on, no.
All right.
Okay?
Good.
The squats are wrong, think.
I think this is a good place to stop for now.
Yeah, I'd say so.
I think we've had more than enough fevered ramblings about Warhammer 40k.
Oh yes, sorry for waxing philosophical there.
Make sure to say goodbye
fun.
to the internet, everyone.
So this is Gary signing off.
This is Grumpy. Bye.
This is Sister Beehive.
This is Corpus Mundum. Thank you for joining us.
This is an unpronounceable Scottish name. See you later.